Please be careful. Yeah. Good morning all. Thank you so much. We may be seated, thank you. Thank you. All right, let me first do the protocol. Welcome all. First and foremost, Your Excellency, the First Lady of the Republic of Namibia, Madam Monica Kenikos, and the UNAIDS Special Envoy on Adolescents and Young People. Welcome. Thank you for making the time. Thank you. And of course, Honorable Vice Minister of China, I think, yes, Shang-Li Jile. Welcome. I hope I have pronounced that correctly. Welcome. All right. And then, of course, our UN country resident coordinator, Hopolang Fororo. Thank you. Welcome. Our co-chairs of the Global HIV Prevention, Prof. Sheila Klue and Michelle Warren. Please welcome them also. Chairs of the HIV Multi-Sectoral Forum, Dr. Ruth Marshall. Our very own Honorable Beans Governors. I think for many of the Namibians, you do not need to be introduced to her. Welcome also our Vice Chair of the Global Fund. Representatives of the Executive Director of UNAIDS and UNFPA, PEPFAR country coordinators, also welcome them, please. Director Generals of National AIDS Coordinating Authorities, representatives of AIDS programs from ministries of health, representatives of community, Ms. Victoria Kamole and Jonathan Solomons, development partners, the media, and of course my co-chair, my co-moderator, Dr. Bernard Manzima, who is also the co-chair of the HIV Multi-Sectoral Leadership Forum. All invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. Obviously, this is not Ben Nangobe. This is Taimi Amambo. I'm the Deputy Executive Director within the Ministry of Health. I'm standing in for our Executive Director of the Ministry of Health. I just really wanted to first do the protocol and welcome you all, but I think we have a very good round of welcoming remarks coming still, so just hang in there. So, welcome to the 15th meeting of the HIV Multi-Sectoral Leadership Forum. Namibia is really honored to have been selected to host this meeting. My name is Taimi Amambo, as I have said, and I want to really just ask us to rise so we can do the national and the AU anthems. Thank you. Thank you. You may be seated. Thank you. Very good. All right. So I just want to alert you that we do have interpretations in the room. We have English, French, Espanol, Spanish, Portuguese, and Chinese. For those in the room, you are welcome to choose the language you prefer to listen to. And for those outside the room, please, you are welcome to go onto our YouTube link to view the event. And unfortunately, it's only available in English. So we would like to, once again, really just want to appreciate your attendance here and to welcome you to this event. It's an HIV multi-sectoral leadership forum, sustaining effective leadership to expedite progress in HIV prevention efforts, to sustain gains that we have made so far, and to bridge disparities. This is a very important forum. And once again, we want to really thank the organizers for choosing Namibia to host this very important forum. Thank you. So to our first lineup to speakers who will be coming to do their brief statements, welcome statement. I would just like to remind you to keep your statement to very briefly to 3 minutes or 5 minutes max if long, so that we have enough time to the most exciting event towards the end of this session, and that will be the launch of the position paper by our First Lady, Madam Monica Keinkos. So without further ado, I would like to really just again call on to all the delegates and especially for our guests. We understand that we will be, by the end of today, we'll have over 100 delegates in this room who will be attending this event, very important. And we also want to really just ensure that everyone who's in this room, or let me see the members to this forum, is actually over 30 members from different continents, not just from Asia, but also East and Southern Africa, but all other continents are represented. So I would like to call on to, let me just see. Our first welcoming remarks will be from my sister, Karina Amutenya, is the chair. She's the chair of Namibia Country Coordinating Mechanism of the Global Fund. Karina, please come on board. Please give her a round of applause as she comes towards the podium. Thank you. Another round of applause.
Thank you, Metaimi. Esteemed members of the National HIV Multi-Sector Leadership Forum, senior government officials, industry representative, workshop delegates, and fellow colleagues, welcome to this prestige platform to discuss pertinent issues laid bare in the theme, sustaining effective leadership to secure gains, bridge disparities, and expedite progress in HIV prevention efforts. Allow me not to recite the list and order of protocol as set, but to stand on the famous quote that says, all protocol observed. As a chair of the Namibian CCM, fondly known as Nakatum, I'm excited and feel immensely privileged to attend and foremost address leaders united by a common goal, to fight the elephant in the room. Not long ago, AIDS really devastated our lives. Your personal convictions to dedicate unwaveringly your efforts and commitment towards fighting HIV and AIDS is highly commendable. We have managed to transform the HIV landscape, saving countless lives and averting catastrophic socioeconomic impacts, socioeconomic AIDS impacts. The saying that says, no one loves a warrior until the enemy is at the gate remains true to date. Today, in the true sense of multi-sectoralism, the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, as well as other partners and stakeholders, continue to support leaders in their efforts to prevent new HIV infections, conduct targeted testing and diagnostic, linked to immediate universal access care, to antiretroviral therapy, and quality but diversified mental health support. Localized institutions such as the CCM, continue to spearhead multidisciplinary and sectoral partnerships, not to mention community structures, which, although bearing the brunt of the epidemic, remained resilient. While significant progress has been achieved, countries are confronted with new challenges. We find ourselves yet at another crossroad. Having learned from the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic austerities that continues to exacerbate existing vulnerabilities, disrupt healthcare system, and further widening disparities, a need exists to adopt innovative strategies to particularly guard against losing achieved gains. Therefore, as we rededicate our commitment over the coming days, let us deliberate on those aspects centering our gains, such as the significant and positioning of the CCMs and community structures. We might fail in our hard-fought efforts if we do not embrace and leverage digital technologies as solution to our responses, using artificial intelligence to revolutionize an accelerated response. In the context of Namibia, the Global Fund had dispersed 372 million since 2004. The incoming CCM membership will further preside over a grind cycle 7 with a funding pocket of 37 million US dollar and an additional 15 million under the COVID additional award. As you already might be aware, Namibia has made significant achievement, surpassing the 90-90-90 UNAIDS targets and on course to achieve epidemiological control towards epidemiological control. In conclusion, let us seize opportunities and platform avail to us to reaffirm our partnerships, triple our efforts towards maximum resource capacity, particularly those at the primary and community prevention levels, thereby ensuring that our health systems are resilient and ready for any eventualities. I wish you all constructive
really multi-sectoral forums where we will find many of the constituencies represented at that forum. Thank you, Karina, for those welcome remarks. Thank you so much. All right. So now up on the line, definitely, yes, we do want to also welcome my sister, Cheryl Amoroso, to the podium to deliver her welcome remarks. You know, PEPFAR has been supporting Namibia for over 20 years in our drive really to get to zero HIV infections and zero AIDS-related deaths. So please welcome Cheryl. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Her Excellency, First Lady Monica Gangos, UN Resident Coordinator, Vice Chair of Global Fund Board, Vice Minister of Health for China, government representatives and leaders present here, National AIDS Council leadership and representatives, civil society members, and all other invited guests. It's an honor to be here today representing the U.S. government at the National HIV Multi-Sector Leadership Forum. The UNAIDS-supported Global Prevention Coalition also represents a significant opportunity to advance and optimize high-impact HIV prevention interventions and options for people who need them most. Prevention has long been a cornerstone of PEPFAR's strategy globally in the fight against HIV/AIDS for over 2 decades. In Namibia, we're very proud of the work that's been planned and implemented collaboratively with government, civil society, and our multilateral partners to support the implementation of the National Strategic Framework. Under government leadership, the country has seen a 65% reduction in new infections since 2004. Success in HIV prevention in Namibia has relied on strong government commitment and political leadership, with allocation of resources and implementation of policies that prioritize prevention. There are many options for prevention, with more on the way, and people have preferences for which services that they want and how they want to receive them. We need to understand the demographic, cultural, and structural issues that impact choice and opportunity for prevention. PEPFAR support in Namibia has an equity focus, and while the program provides support throughout the country to all people living with HIV, programming is also targeted to specific groups, focusing on understanding and addressing underlying challenges. Regular program assessment helps government to make data-driven decisions, adapting strategies and ensuring that resources are allocated to interventions that will yield the greatest results. It includes understanding which populations have structural barriers beyond just service availability and working with the communities in order to address them. Mitigation of stigma and discrimination is essential. Antiretroviral treatment has had a significant impact on controlling the HIV epidemics through reduction of new infection. Yet each encounter a person has with the health system is a potential prevention opportunity. Negative HIV test outcomes can result in prevention action, similarly to how we are all very comfortable with positive results leading immediately to treatment initiation. PEPFAR supports the implementation of PrEP, condom demand creation, VMMC, PEP, U=U, and social behavior change using human-centered approaches. It's a key part of our work in Namibia and globally. Optimization of programming and sustainable solutions for service delivery and prevention technologies require innovation and policies which are able to be flexible. For example, Namibia just recently reviewed its differentiated service delivery standards of procedure, and it looked at ways to integrate prevention options with known successful models of outreach, such as comprehensive community-based health services. This is the type of innovative thinking we need to be able to take the next steps for prevention. Initiatives such as smart lockers used in Namibia offer the chance to expand hours for clinic pickup, for treatment, as well as for prevention options. Guiding documents and forms such as these that we're here for today ensure that we're all pulling in the same direction to further reduce new infections. Our collaboration is crucial for success. We look forward to hearing the recommendations from this group and the group's support for the future of sustainable prevention. Prevention is knowledge that empowers, options that suit, and services that protect. On behalf of the United States government, I'm pleased to be at this launch of these crucial documents, and I wish you much success in what I know will be a valuable meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cheryl, for those welcome remarks. I think by now, our invited guest must be feeling really welcome. You must be feeling really comfortable right now, because we are so many speakers really just trying to make you comfortable. So at least what you can do now is to put a smile on your face. Please give another round of applause to Shell. Thank you. I think all over this country, when you go around, especially deep in the remote areas, you will see visible footprints of PEPFAR-supported programs, be it at the health facility level or community level. These are really some of the investments that we have been cherishing and ensuring that it reach everyone who need to be reached in this country. Thank you again, PEPFAR, for that support. Last but not least on this welcome session is my other sister, our UN country resident coordinator. Please come on board, come to the podium so you can do your welcome statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Director of Ceremonies, and very good morning to all of you. Oh, okay, let's try again. A very good morning to all of you. Thank you. So I would like to acknowledge Her Excellency Monica Genkos, the First Lady of the Republic of Namibia and UNAIDS Special Envoy for Adolescents and Young People, Honorable Chai Ji-lei, China Vice Minister of Health. I don't think I pronounced it well, but I tried. Dr. Ruth Masha, Chairperson of the Leadership Forum, Professor Sheila Tlo, the Co-Chair of Global HIV Prevention Coalition. And I would like to also observe there, from this point, therefore, all protocols. And then, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to join you at this National HIV Multi-Sector Leadership Forum on Sustainable Effective Leadership to secure gains, bridge disparities, and expedite progress in HIV prevention efforts organized by UNAIDS and UNFPA. At least those are the ones I've noted. I would like then just to share a few reflections with you this morning. And my first point is really around partnerships, which lie at the heart of the Sustainable Development Goals. And the reality is that funds at both global and national level are shrinking, which pushes us into situations where to realize impact, we do have to partner. Imagine a three-legged pot, the black one. I'm sure we are familiar with it, especially if we are from Eastern or Southern Africa, and the one with the three legs. And I see these three legs as government, development partners, or the UN and civil society organizations. Without one, the pot will not be able to stand and it will topple over. So for us then to secure gains, bridge disparities, and expedite progress in HIV prevention efforts, we need each other. We must leverage on each other's strengths, including continuing to build on our ability to listen, particularly to civil society, because many times these are our implementing partners and definitely have a wide outreach, at least in the regions where we are not always best able to service, that is government and development partners. So we would like to enter into meaningful and rewarding partnerships to deliver these services. Social contracting is one crucial mechanism to make prevention work, especially for populations the government may find hard to reach. And I recommend the government of Namibia for launching the social contract policy last week to realize this end. Secondly, with the engagement of civil society, the AIDS response had a steep increase in HIV financing. The UNAIDS joint program, comprising the United Nations agencies working together, is innovative in its design and implementation, and is an excellent blueprint for the UN working as one by bringing added value for joint results. At this juncture, where the United Nations in Namibia is developing its Sustainable Development Cooperation Framework for 2025 to 2029, which will align with the National Development Plan number 6 in a bid to leave no one behind, the concerns of people living with AIDS and prevention will and has to be included. This is notwithstanding the fact that the financing for HIV is unlikely to go back to the billions of the mid-2010s. So we need to plan for innovative solutions that will attract these resources. Forging strong partnerships, I repeat again, with the UN and development partners is also grounded in effective exit and sustainability strategies. And I once again also commend Namibia's efforts in developing a sustainability roadmap for HIV, tuberculosis, and malaria. Third, I would like to applaud the organizers of this forum for providing this platform to demonstrate leadership and to exchange ideas and to network. And I particularly would like to also just say that the new generation of national AIDS authorities should evolve, guided by deliberate and effective planning and learning from countries with effective national AIDS authorities on the crucial features required to advance the AIDS response, which is integrated in all the SDGs. I look back at how far we have come in the fight against AIDS. However, stigma and discrimination still persist against people living with AIDS, particularly populations marginalized due to their risk behaviors, demographic characteristics, and sexual orientation, pushing them into secrecy and not accessing the critical services. The UN will continue to protect the human rights of all groups of people. I remain committed as resident coordinator for Namibia, working closely with the UN entities, specifically UNAIDS, since it's the one leading in this particular work, to effectively leverage the wider UN system in supporting the AIDS prevention in Namibia. Thank you for your attention and wishing you very fruitful deliberations.
Thank you so much. Our UN country resident coordinator, Hopolang Fororo. Thank you so much. This is again just another wave of really demonstrating the partnership we have already in the country, and this is how they are working in partnership. It's very good that Namibia is part of the UN family, and that's where we're coming from. Thank you so much for your welcome remarks. At this juncture, I would like to call on my co-moderator, Dr. Bernard Manzima, to take over the next session. Dr. Manzima is currently the CEO of Zimbabwe National AIDS Council. He is a medical doctor by profession and a public health specialist, having worked in the Ministry of Health and Childcare in Zimbabwe for over 20 years, growing in his career up to the director level. So Dr. Manzima, please welcome him to the podium and to also handle and manage the proceedings further. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, my co-chair, Madam Taimi Amambo, for leading since we started this session. Ladies and gentlemen, let me recognize Excellency, the First Lady of Namibia, and also our guest of honor, Madam Gengos. Allow me to ride on the protocols already established. Good morning, everyone. Yes, thank you for being here. So, hour or so is to invite guests to share with us their experiences. And the first guest I will invite is Dr. Ruth Masha. She will come to the podium. Dr. Ruth Masha is an expert in public health with more than 22 years experience of work experience in government, in United Nations, civic society. Currently, she is the Chief Executive Officer of the National Endemic Disease Control Council, as well as the chairperson of this forum, the HIV Multi-Sectoral Leadership Forum of Director Generals of National AIDS Councils, coordinating agencies. Dr. Masha will introduce to us the HIV, the purpose and the objectives behind the HIV Multi-Sector Leadership Forum. Welcome, Dr. Masha. May we encourage you?
Your Excellency, the First Lady of Namibia, we will observe protocol to save time, but just to say that we are privileged to be hosted by you today and for you to grace this occasion. I want to take this opportunity as I start to introduce this forum to recognize all Director Generals that are present from various agencies that are charged with the responsibility of coordinating their HIV responses. And just to say that we are encouraged by you, Your Excellency, for maintaining the leadership in Africa on HIV prevention. When we started this forum, Your Excellency, at first it was just to comply or put an obligation to a global commitment we had made on HIV prevention. But then with time, we actually realized that we needed to invest in this forum, not just to meet the targets, but to sustain the progress that we were making, as well as to drive our countries to end HIV infections, as well as AIDS-related deaths. So this forum was established in 2018 with support from the Global HIV Prevention Coalition. And this first meeting was actually like a brainstormer. It was held in Amsterdam with a broad objective to accelerate the attainment of global HIV prevention targets under the auspices of the Global HIV Prevention Coalition. And one of the areas that at that time was a key argument was that there was need to strengthen multi-sector action as well as to strengthen country systems. By November 2023, this forum had convened about 14 meetings and facilitated a lot of peer learning on prevention of HIV. But most importantly, is that it's this forum that allowed us to learn when we heard about the COVID pandemic from China, facilitated by the National AIDS Coordinating Agency, to sit down and understand what was going on in China and how we could respond better to COVID pandemic. And by last year, of course, we have been part of the people that are contributing to what we're seeing as global results, but we still do know that the challenge of new HIV infection still persists. And when we have about 28 million people living with HIV receiving treatment, and about 71% of them having virus suppressed, we know that the challenge of new HIV infection shall still persist, because what we'd expect is that we have put everyone on treatment, their viral load is suppressed, and therefore the discourse that happened many years ago that we can treat ourselves out of the epidemic then could have been nearer the truth. But unfortunately, we are facing 2030 with a discourse that we are telling ourselves will end AIDS in a context where even the quality of our treatment program has not reached where we intended it to reach, meaning that that may be a fallacy. When we started this dialogue and discussion, we were talking about 1.6 million HIV infections globally. And last year, we were about 1.3 million. And that's why we were briefing you and saying it's really something that we're making progress, but not sufficient enough for us to actually say that we can stop here. In 2023, we did strengthen and rebranded this forum to become a multi-sector HIV leadership forum. And at this point, a lot of issues are beginning to emerge. The country ecosystem, the global architecture of funding has changed and will never be the same. It has been redefined by the COVID-19 pandemic. It has been redefined by the concept that systems everywhere were not strong enough to handle a concurrent epidemic. And also redefined by the fact that we noticed how fragile the gains that we had for the HIV response were, especially in the context of new HIV prevention. And also redefined that national stewardship will mean building national systems and platforms that have to drive investments. And when we talk about investment, we talk about bringing the voices of countries to all funding architecture to understand when we speak investment, we may probably be speaking different languages from different places, maybe because you're not sharing our experience enough to see what does that small little girl in the village needs. Your Excellency, let me just divert here and tell you a story. I went to visit a subnational leader. And when I walked into the room, he started talking about water. And I thought for one moment that he had confused me with the person representing the Ministry of Water. And so of course, you don't interrupt when leaders are speaking. So he spoke and he talked about dams, talked about water. And then after he finished his speech, he asked me to stand and look outside the window. And outside there were women and children. I didn't know what they had come to do. I mean, he's a governor, we call them governor. And he said, those women here have come for food. And then again, I was still wondering what that had to do with me. And he said, don't come tell me about HIV if you don't sort out that water problem. And then that is when the aha moment happened and I began to engage. And he said to me, this area we grew cabbages. And the women you can see there actually were cabbage farmers. So what happened, they would go to the market on a Wednesday and on a Saturday. They would take their cabbage. But when the climate changed and the water dried up point, the cabbage was no longer there. So the women continued going to the market. And that area is on a transport corridor. And therefore, to go home back with food, they had to look for something else. And that is when the sex patterns changed. And then when the subnational officer presented their data, we observed something different from other areas. We have been speaking about young girls getting HIV infection, but from their program data, the zero HIV infection conversion was among the ones aged 35 and above, women. So his story made sense. It made sense that something had changed and that something was not in the health sector. Whatever had changed in another sector and required somebody to begin to see what we do differently if you have to end new HIV infection in this particular area. And that is why we are coming back to say the multi-sector action must continue because some of these challenges are beyond health. Unfortunately, the discourse in most countries is we have a big agenda and small politics. We are still talking about who is attending what meeting when really the issue is what institutions do we have in place to address the multi-sectoral areas that are required to deliver us out of this epidemic. Your Excellency, this forum has a number of countries and they're outlined there. Some of them, most of them are represented today. And we have also moved ahead from limiting ourselves to where there's only high burden and high new HIV infections because there are some who are there before us and they did something different. And we are saying, let's learn for people who are interested. Every time we get a country expressing their interest to join the HIV Leadership Forum, we don't keep them away, but we say, you're welcome because we're here to learn. So in various meetings, and we cannot go through all of them, we have been able to outline the progress as well as what we are able to do and look back and see some of the areas that we require improvement. But over time, across these 15 meetings, we look at them, we've met in Nairobi, we have met, we have chairpersons that we elected, and we have continuously met. We all end up to one area, that there are serious barriers. And these serious barriers are always clustered into leadership, resilient community systems, making the current resource basket work, the legal environment, and issues around transitions. And finally, how to place prevention of HIV back to the agenda. So we have spoken over time, but the challenges remain the same. The barriers remain the same because the systems are not changing. Thank you for completing for me. So we are actually in a scenario where this diagram represents some of the things we've been doing. The stream continued to flow. People are crying for help, and these are our people. And we are caught up in systems that do not allow us to see far, but instead to swim the row the boat around a place that we have not charted the way. And that's why, Your Excellency, this meeting is very important for this forum, that we have taken note of where we have taken note of progress, and we know that we carry the burden of new HIV infections, most of the countries represented here. And we are going to live here with a commitment, a person commitment, and because we know individual commitments translate into national commitments. We cannot lie to ourselves that to change a system, most of the time requires to call the entire country for a meeting. We know changing system requires champions, and those champions acquire more champions who then resonate with what the person on the ground is talking about. That governor who is talking about water needs to get a response from us. Who is the leader? Who is supposed to do this work? But this cannot happen when we design architecture funding and we say these things don't matter. And then we come back in meeting rooms and say they matter. So this is where we have to go. We must invest in those barriers, and we must not just invest with lip service, but put money behind the talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Masha, for not only giving a background and sharing objectives of the Leadership Forum, but also highlighting the importance of having an integrated approach to issues. Ladies and gentlemen, we all know that we appreciate the role of community in the HIV response. We are aware how important it is to have communities buy in if we are to succeed in our programs of combating not only HIV, but any other diseases which are a public health threat. And recently we had COVID-19 to show that it is important to involve communities. So for the HIV program, yes, it is important. And it's important for us to work with communities of people living with HIV. So at this moment, I have the pleasure to invite a representative from the people living with the HIV community. And her name is Victoria Kamule. Victoria is a renowned champion for the rights of HIV communities, and she will share first-hand experiences of HIV and being a COVID-19 survivor. Victoria, may you please come up and tell us how you navigated living with COVID-19 as well as HIV. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director of Proceedings. Let me pay my respect to the President of the Republic of Namibia, His Excellency Dr. Hage Geingob, the First Lady of Namibia, Madam Monica Geingos, who is here with us this morning. Allow me to stand on the protocols that is already established. I am standing here not only as a representative of people living with HIV, but myself, a woman living with HIV for almost 27 years this year. Let me start by registering our appreciation of this partnership and the collaboration of our governments and the HIV Leadership Forum, the development partners, including PEPFAR, UNFPI, UNAIDS, and other partners that continue to nurture the partnership, continue to nurture the with civil society organizations, and especially with people living with HIV. The work that the National AIDS Coordinating Institution and the Ministry of Health would not be possible without civil society. And we need to continue to strengthen this partnership. Before I go into my remarks, let me highlight that even though we are making progress in HIV response, we need to keep the track and revitalize HIV prevention within our various communities. The attainment of the 95, 95, 95 targets should not lead to complacency as the new infection continue to rise, especially among some population groups like the young people and the key population. Now coming to the point at hand, 2 pandemics, 2 viruses, the untold impact of HIV and COVID-19 on humanity. Even though COVID-19 was not necessarily targeting people living with HIV, we do note that those who had not achieved viral suppression through antiretroviral treatment may have a compromised immune system that leaves them vulnerable to opportunistic infection, including COVID-19 and further HIV disease progression. We also saw how COVID-19 emergency protocol disrupted everything in our lives, from getting basic necessities such as food, menstrual products, and most importantly, accessing healthcare become one of the biggest challenges, especially for people living with HIV. We saw how the lockdown and the movement restriction led to some of the community members being unable to access their treatment, including ART refill, especially in the early days of COVID-19 pandemic. And more importantly, prevention initiatives and hygiene products. How shocking was it when we saw some pictures of condoms and menstrual pads cordoned off as non-essential items in some of the supermarkets? Thanks to the advocacy of some of you and other community members who made it possible to have those sections and aisle reopen for people to access condoms and menstrual products, among other essentials. So among all the other people who contracted COVID-19, for people living with HIV, this burden was more than double due to various beyond COVID-19, making it difficult for everyone accessing health and others. HIV were also challenged in terms of dealing with 2 pandemics in one body. Challenge in terms of not just that, but with an increased risk of even contracting COVID-19. There was a lot of anxiety among people living with HIV, and the unfounded myths around COVID-19 and HIV did not help. Hence, it became very emotional and psychologically draining time for most of us people living with HIV. We saw an increased cases of defaulters as people could not or were delayed to refill their ART supplies due to various factors, including movement restriction, cost, and mobility challenges. Socioeconomic challenges as others lost their source of income, as well as the absence of some of services in some healthcare facilities. We are, however, glad that the advocacy and strategies we have been using for HIV response came in very handy for the COVID-19 response. So our hard work of more than 20 years has not been in vain. Multi-month dispensing became an urgent necessity. Task shifting had to be done almost immediately, even though in those countries which had reservation about task shifting. Importantly, the critical role of and agility of community-based and community-led organization literally saved the day. We are therefore grateful to the shift and partners to ensure that despite the treatment disruption that happened in other places, that was restricted through partnership with community groups and organizations, people were able to receive their medication through various ways, including home deliveries. This was another testimony of a great work that had started, such as establishing community adherence groups, which became the flagship initiative established here in Namibia. These are just a few efforts of examples of how the HIV response continue to inform the broader public health response, including pandemic preparedness and response. It is therefore through our collaboration efforts that we shall sustain some of these gains and ensure that all countries achieve pandemic control such that our resilience against pandemic and other shock is enhanced. Director of Ceremony, let me conclude by highlighting a few recommendations and a call to action from our leaders present here this morning. We are calling for a stronger focus on HIV prevention and a bold leadership to ensure that all population groups are reached with prevention services. We are also called for a stronger partnership and collaboration and funding for indigenous civil society organizations as they understand the context and the dynamics of the population they serve. They have a lot to bring to the table. We call for scaling up of practical and community-led accountability initiatives, such as community-led monitoring and non-politicization of such initiatives. These are for the people, and it should work for the people. We need to urgently make new prevention and treatment products available to people at risk of contracting HIV and those who live with HIV, such as long-acting injectables and dual-purpose HIV pregnancy prevention ring for women. We need to monitor the effects of COVID-19 in terms of long COVID vaccines on people living with HIV to ensure that the lessons that are learned and our response improves in future pandemic interventions. Finally, Let me take this opportunity to once again thank the HIV Leadership Forum, the partners for sharing the space with us as civil society organization, and for our continued collaboration towards the attainment of the 2023 Agenda for Sustainable Development as an public health threat. And I believe yeah, we can make it. I thank you.
Thank you, Victoria, for sharing your experiences and giving recommendations. That was quite insightful. May you continue with your work in the public sector for people living with HIV. To the next speakers, may we please manage our time and limit our speeches to 3 minutes so that we remain on time. Ladies and gentlemen, the next speaker represents a very important group of people. These are young people. And we always say we need their voices to be heard and from their own. So Jonathan Solomon, who is the next speaker, is here with us today and is going to talk to us. Again, it's like we are hearing it from the horse's mouth as far as the views of the young people is concerned. I want to welcome Jonathan, and may we encourage him as he walks up to the podium.
Dear esteemed invited guests, Her Excellency, First Lady of Namibia, Madam Monica Gangos, I stand on the protocol observed. My name is Jonathan Sasha Solomons, LGBTIQ and sex worker rights activist, design, monitoring, evaluation, and learning officer for the Free to Be Me project, and the representative of Positive Vibes Namibia. Free to Be Me is a vibrant global project operating in over 14 countries, which aims to build progressive and inclusive societies for LGBTQ persons nationally and globally. I stand here before you today as a gay Namibian man. I can proudly say this as I have lived in this country my entire life, and I love it with all my heart. I'm here to talk to you today on the topic of why ending sexual violence is a critical element in ending new HIV infections. But I cannot talk about sexual violence in isolation. Without observing the hostile and discriminatory environments the LGBTIQ community must navigate in this country on a daily basis in a bid for survival. Violence is a byproduct of othering and can manifest itself in various ways. In a country where sexual orientation and gender identity is not protected under the law, it becomes a particularly difficult task to break through the system of othering, ending violence in all its forms and gain justice for marginalized groups. Such othering is not harmless. It manifests in social stigma, discrimination, and exclusion. It fuels prejudice, homophobia, transphobia, and hate speech. It creates a sense of fear, uncertainty, and anxiety. It causes psychological and emotional damage. It inhibits people from seeking healthcare for fear of judgment and exposure, and exponentially increases their risk. Namibia's road to equity has been a long and noble one. However, laws affecting the bodily autonomy and integrity of LGBTIQ persons need to be addressed. The laws have a significant and ongoing negative impact on the daily lives of LGBTIQ persons, sex workers, and adolescent girls and young women. These offenses contribute to the ongoing and significant stigmatization and impacts their ability to live with dignity. It makes it even more difficult to access services such as healthcare, particularly HIV treatment and prevention. When persons in this country are persecuted based on their sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, and their means to make a living, it creates barriers in seeking justice and hold those accountable who are perpetrators of sexual violence. For sexual violence to end, the system of beliefs which enables it needs to be dismantled and reconstructed to be inclusive and equitable. The beauty of Namibia lies in the celebration of our diversity, a diversity that is drawing in tourism, contributing to the economy, and adding to the rich tapestry of cultural difference. To acknowledge the needs of the diverse, our policies and laws need to focus on equity and justice. Equity requires that people are treated in attitude, regard, and services in a way that recognize every person is equally deserving of the highest standard of living, suited to their unique needs. Responses to these needs need to be nuanced and tailored for gender diversity, biological sex, gender identity, and gender expression and sexual orientation. It needs to be accessible to all people, especially those who may face barriers, social, economic, class, physical, legal, and environmental, to accessing governance processes and public services, as well as engagement opportunities with social, policy, and legal reform. I thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan, for your presentation, representing young people. At this stage, I want to invite Michelle Warren, the co-chair, Global Prevention Coalition, to give us further insights. The fact that progress in HIV prevention remains vulnerable unless we address the issue of program designs. Michelle Warren has been executive director of AVAC since 2004. And this organization uses education, policy analysis, advocacy, communications, and a network of global collaborations to accelerate the ethical development and global delivery of new and emerging HIV prevention options. He's a member of the PEPFAR Scientific Advisory Board, the International AIDS Society Governing Council, president of the TB Alliance Stakeholder Association, and past president of the Global HIV Vaccine Enterprise. Welcome, Michelle, and over to you.
Great. I hope that you can hear me. I'll assume you can. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm delighted to be here with you, and at least virtually. And I appreciate that you didn't introduce me after Jonathan as representing the older people. But it's a great pleasure to come after you, Jonathan, and to hear your words. Let me thank the First Lady of Namibia for being in the room and all other protocols observed. I actually first went to Namibia, actually, Jonathan, probably before you were born, I dare to think. In the mid-1990s, I was working throughout Southern Africa, working on some of the first condom social marketing programs. And when I think back, and for those of you who were around in the mid-90s, I ask you to think back of what it was like, what this pandemic was like as it was bursting onto the scenes in the region and around the world. And when I think back to those days, I frankly couldn't have imagined how far we have come. 25 years later, how much has been accomplished. And just think, if you have been working in this field or been aware of HIV and AIDS since the early 90s or mid 1990s, you too will be amazed at what we have achieved together. And you've heard that from so many of the speakers so far. It is about partnerships. I mean, it is the work that we can accomplish together. And to think of the number of people receiving antiretroviral therapy, to think about the progress that we've made in HIV prevention, the development of new technologies, it really is quite breathtaking. But so much of those accomplishments actually provide an amazing to-do list of work still undone. So as we often say, there is much accomplished, but much still to do. And I would argue that in the midst of all of that progress that we have achieved together in Namibia, in Southern Africa, throughout the African continent, and in fact, throughout the world, we must never confuse that progress with success. Because although we have achieved a great deal together, we are a long way from the ultimate end of this pandemic. That is the reality for all of the progress that we've achieved of the unfinished business. And then I would also say that that progress, as great as it is, and one of the earlier speakers did speak of the great success in Namibia, achieving 90-90-90, the treatment targets put out by the UN, and on the road to 95-95-95. But that progress is remarkably fragile. If we don't do a key part of the phrase of this entire convening, and that is about a sustainable response. Because we have achieved a great deal in treatment, we're achieving progress in prevention, but if we don't instill the sustainability in our work, then we could tip back just as easily as we have tipped forward. The opportunity, though, is amazing for us right now. And as I think about the gathering this week in Namibia, thinking about what we have achieved and what we still need to do in prevention, there's an enormous amount of good news. For the first time in this entire history of the pandemic, we have multiple options to provide people. We have obviously male and female condoms that we've had for decades. We have voluntary medical male circumcision. And we now have 3 different pre-exposure prophylaxis options: oral pills, which we've had now for almost a decade, a vaginal ring, and now injectable PrEP as well. So the opportunity in front of us is, how do we take those biomedical options, condoms and circumcision and PrEP in all of its forms, and how do we make those options actual choices for people? Young women and young men, older women and older men, people who define and describe themselves in any different way that works for them, no matter who they love, no matter how they love. How do we make those biomedical options choices in people's lives? And that's where it gets messy. The science, as hard as it is actually relatively easy in developing those products. But when we involve people in their lives, health providers, health systems, their peer groups, that's where things get both very exciting, but very challenging. So I hope over the next 3 days that together we will all discuss and think about how we translate the options available into choices that actually end pandemics. And the challenge is not just with HIV. Our challenge in front of us is to actually do even better than we did with any past technology, and better than we did with COVID, to do it with a scale and an urgency, and most importantly, with an equity. And Victoria spoke of this. The greatest technologies, if not made available with equity, do not end pandemics. COVID vaccines did not end COVID because they were not delivered with speed and with urgency and with equity. So with all of the new technologies in HIV prevention, our challenge is to do it with equity so that people who need it, who want it, who can benefit from it, can actually access it and use it. And so as you ponder for the next 3 days, what we do together as policymakers, as first ladies, as health providers, as civil society, we all have choices. We have choices in what we do. We have choices in how we do it. We have choices going out of this meeting in 3 days' time, from Windhoek going forward into each of our communities and countries. We have choices. And I would argue that the choice in front of each of us is, will we take the science that has been provided, and will we deliver it with equity? And fundamentally, it is about addressing human rights, because we know, whether we're talking about HIV or COVID or Ebola or any public health reality, that if we don't address human rights, no epidemic ends. So our tasks are huge, but our opportunities have never been greater in 42 years of this pandemic. So I hope that we'll all come together and choose to make the decisions that actually can get us truly, truly on the path to end AIDS in our lifetime. Thank you very much. So sorry not to be with you in Windhoek, but I wish you the best in deliberations there.
Thank you, Micho Warren, for that presentation. May I now, at this stage, invite Professor Sheila Tolu to present on the political and technical leadership at country level, what is needed there, and how this is critical for establishing sustainable HIV prevention systems. Professor Tolu is the co-chair of the Global HIV Prevention Coalition. She's the Chancellor of the Botswana Open University and member of Board of Trustees for Society for AIDS in Africa, the SAR, which organizes the ICASA, the International Conference on AIDS and STIs in Africa. And I will take this opportunity to inform the House that this year's edition of ICASA is going to be in Zimbabwe, in Harare and Victoria Falls. And may we all be there. Those who have not received invitations, I'm here to do that. Including the guest of honor. She's invited. Yes, so Professor Tolu is the former UNAIDS director, regional director for UNAIDS, as well as former Minister of Health for Botswana. And she has received over 30 international awards for leadership in global health. Welcome, Professor Sheila.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mazima. Okay, let's shake a little bit. Yeah. How are you? Linjani? ¿Cómo estás? ¿Cómo va você? Ni hao. Habari gani? Maskara se?
Tasmira.
Aha. Mapenduka. Legal. Aha. That's the protocol I'm observing. So let me recognize our First Lady and just say it is always a pleasure for me to be in Namibia, the land of the brave and the beloved land of the savannas. But it's even more great because of the fact that I can actually enter Namibia, not through a passport, but with my national ID. Now, that's the Africa we want. Rwanda has followed suit. Kenya is in the process, and I'm really hoping that one day in my lifetime, I'll be able to travel from Cape to Cairo and beyond without a passport. And I'm looking forward to that. So, my dear First Lady, to me, that's the political commitment that we all need and appreciate, because I know in there, you must have, when this thing was discussed, said to HE, Sheila comes here often, and sometimes she loses her passport, so she needs to be able to just come with a national ID, and it has happened. So we are very grateful for that. So let me recognize all of you, especially our First Lady and the Vice Minister of Health of China. And as my co-chair has already stated, we come from far. Victoria, you are great. And I also want to recognize, is it Solomon? Yes, that's it. You know, I was born and bred in civil society. So everywhere I go, I have to make sure that I tell you that you are great. I've been now 40 years in the AIDS response, from 2003, when I met Noreen Kaleba, to when the first case was diagnosed in Botswana, up to now. So this is history moving. And we come from a long way, but we have made quite a lot of strides. As a young civil society activist and professor in Botswana, the realities of AIDS were not just statistics on paper, but faces, stories, and lived experiences of populations. From there to my tenure as Minister of Health, UNAIDS Regional Director, and now as co-chair of the Global HIV Prevention Coalition, every chapter has been a lesson and a clarion call for international global action. This year, the GPC has invited important countries to join the coalition, and these include Central African Republic, Colombia, Egypt, Madagascar, Papua New Guinea, Peru, Rwanda, South Sudan, Congo, and Thailand. Sawadee ka. We look forward to working together with each country to advance HIV prevention and indeed to ensure that we reach those targets. Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, in 2022, 1.3 million people acquired HIV. We have made some progress, but it is still far from the target of fewer than 370,000 new HIV infections annually by 2025. So we cannot overemphasize the urgency of accelerating HIV prevention efforts when we have just 2 years left to 2025. We are continually confronted with the barriers that still need our collective effort to address and to implement. To ensure that we implement at scale, strong political leadership is needed. First, to address the policy and legal barriers that continue to impede access to HIV prevention services. We need to intensify our efforts in advocating for the removal of harmful laws that Victoria and Solomon just highlighted, and ensure that we create an enabling environment conducive to HIV prevention service and delivery and access. Secondly, we need to increase HIV prevention financing. While we can leverage global resources, we need to, in the spirit of shared responsibility and global solidarity, lobby within our own governments to increase and/or allocate some domestic resources to HIV prevention. On that one, Zimbabwe, you are still a great example that needs to be copied as best practice across the continent. I salute you. Recognizing the critical nature of country leadership, the coalition supported the establishment in 2019 of a community of practice of national AIDS coordinating authorities directors. And these are the ones that Ruth Masha has just highlighted. It is a great platform for accelerating action by leveraging and strengthening national prevention leadership and accountability and driving implementation at country level. Now, that's the crux of political and technical leadership. Political will drives resources, sets priorities, and shapes public discourse. Technical leadership, on the other hand, ensures that our strategies follow the science, and they are doing exactly that. The two must go hand in hand to build the necessary national systems for accountability and sustainability. It means bringing communities to the forefront of our strategies, and indeed, not just as beneficiaries, but as active participants and as leaders. It means following the data to make evidence-informed decisions. It means leveraging innovation to inform country-specific strategies. For our global partners, support to country leadership means a willingness to be coordinated for joint action and investments in national health, social, and economic systems. Colleagues, as co-chair of the GPC, I pledge to continue to work with you to secure and protect the gains made and to bridge the disparities that drag us back and to expedite, of course, through advocacy, all the progress that we have made. Je vous remercie beaucoup. I thank you.
Thank you, Professor Tolu, for your very enthusiastic presentation, but highlighting how important it is to link politics and technical if you're going to have a successful program. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now want to hand over the next session to Ms. Shupala, who will continue to lead us into the next session of the program, and maybe my co-chair will assist me here. There's an issue of inviting cultural presenters, the IK Cultural Group, to do a presentation. I thank you, maybe. Co-chair. I was not sure who Shupala is. Okay, fine. So, okay, yeah, continue. So I just wanted this part clear. Thank you, IK Cultural Group, for the beautiful presentation of the Namibian culture through a well-orchestrated song and dance. Let's give them another round of applause. At this stage, our presentations now. Oh, okay. There's another group. Thank you to the dancers. Thank you. Thank you to the dancers. Thank you. Let's clap hands for the dancers as they leave. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Yes, we are behind time. We are behind time. And let me call upon the next presenters who are going to discuss the issues of money, making the money work, to quickly do their presentations. The first one will be a video by Dr. Natalia Kanem, Executive Director for UNFPA. So may we have the video playing, please, media team.
Distinguished guests, dear colleagues, dear friends, dear young people, congratulations to the HIV Leadership Forum on behalf of UNFPA, the United Nations Sexual and Reproductive Health Agency. The work you do is so important, and UNFPA is very proud to be co-convener of the Global HIV Prevention Coalition. My message to you is this: prevention is always better than cure. There is hope to curb the rate of new HIV infections, even if today the rate of decrease has to move much more quickly to end AIDS by 2030. And can we turn the tide? Yes, of course. If we work together across sectors, and if we commit to smart, cost-effective investments in HIV prevention, and this is where you come in. Your steadfast, outspoken efforts move us closer to our HIV prevention targets. By empowering communities and generating data, you are keeping us all accountable. Continue to walk with courage, to use your voice, and add your push for societal change. That's how we succeed, lifting up the most vulnerable populations. Too many suffer from the failure to provide inclusive and respectful services. So to accelerate progress on HIV, we need equity. We need scale. We need to banish stigma and judgmentalism. And we need a common understanding of prevention, and that should be based on what the evidence tells us. Let us shift the paradigm from funding to financing, including domestic financing for HIV prevention. This is mission critical because we face shrinking financial resources. The latest figures show a widening HIV funding gap in low and middle income countries, 2.6% less last year than the year before. The good news is that 42 countries increased their domestic HIV funding since 2015. They've understood the cost of inaction and the benefits of decisive measures. Even as we advocate for more funds for prevention programs, especially for key populations, let's use those funds more effectively to knock down all structural barriers, social, legal, political, and economic, that prevent people from getting the respectful quality care they need and deserve. UNFPA joins UNAIDS and all of you on the front lines of prevention. Next year, as we celebrate ICPD 30, let's not miss the opportunity to assert the challenges and also speak of options in advancing sexual and reproductive health and rights. Let's embrace the sexual and reproductive health and rights movement as people of goodwill, expressed in all our sexual diversities. There's an African proverb I'd like to share. If you wish to move mountains tomorrow, start by lifting stones today. Together, step by step, stone by stone, with your leadership and partnership, we can achieve our HIV prevention targets and bring the end of AIDS within reach. Remember, commit, never give up, and keep moving forward.
Thank you, UNFPA, Dr. Natalia Kanem. Let me invite Bianca Gawanas, who is the former Undersecretary General and Special Advisor on Africa to the UN Secretary General. She has served in various capacities in Namibia. Bianca is currently the Vice Chair of the Global Fund Board, representing the implementing partner constituents. Bianca. Yes.
Doc, I think a lot of people were wondering who is coming to speak.
Me too.
Beans Governors is my name. First Lady of Namibia, Ms. Monica Keingos. Deputy Minister Chang Chili, and may I just say, fellow warriors, I'm really, really grateful to join you here today, not only in my capacity as the Vice Chair of the Global Fund, but 20 years ago, to be exact, I joined the African Union as the Commissioner for Social Affairs. And it was during this time that I came to understand that the fight was on. I think of the 2001 Abuja Declaration, when African leaders came together to say, we need to do something in the fight against HIV. And it was not long after that, that we had the Global Fund partnership that until today continue to play a very important role. Much has been said of what I also wanted to say, so I will cut that out and just say, when we started the fight against HIV, we were very clear that it was a question of awareness. It was a question of prevention. At that time, we did not have treatment. And then we had the treatment, and I think somehow we became a little bit complacent. And we forgot that we had not end AIDS, that it was still important for us to prevent HIV. So as the speakers earlier said, we have made progress, but that is not success. And so we continue to make sure that we put the money where the mouth is. People talked about inequities between and within countries. And it is these inequities that foil the virus, leaving out many key and vulnerable populations from HIV responses. Many people with the greatest HIV prevention needs have no access to HIV prevention. Many countries are still off track to achieving the target of ending AIDS as a public health threat by 2030. A central premise in the Global Fund strategy of 2023-2028 is that health is a human right. People should have access to the health services they need, regardless of who they are, where they are, who they love, who they have sex with, without discrimination on any grounds. Punitive laws, stigma and discrimination, and other human rights and gender-related barriers hamper the Global Fund's ability to deliver on its promises of ending AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis. So the question that I have for you is that what can leaders like yourselves gathered here today do to stop this? How can our countries put a stop to this disproportionate level of HIV infections among young women and girls, as well as other vulnerable and key populations? I will submit that it is by leading countries doing more to improve access to HIV prevention that we can address inequities. It is also by leading countries to confront the growing threat of human rights. Too often, the people most vulnerable to HIV are the same people who don't have access to health care. We must expand access to HIV prevention and continue to invest in areas that open up multiple opportunities for the most vulnerable. We must also increase support to communities in their efforts to fight restrictive policies and laws that criminalize key populations. We, as the leaders gathered here, can lead the global health community in rallying behind that effort, looking at every HIV program through the human rights lens and ensuring that we invest vigorously in programs that promote and protect the rights of the most vulnerable. At the Global Fund, we have invested in addressing structural, behavioral, and biomedical risks that are faced by the vulnerable populations. We have also invested in integrated health delivery. Our Breaking Down Barriers initiative puts in the hands of people affected by HIV, TB, and malaria the knowledge, the skills, and the mechanisms to understand, demand, and secure their health-related human rights. I want to conclude by saying, across our investments, we are committed to integrating human rights principles, participation, equity, accountability, and transparency throughout the grant cycle and increasingly into the policy-making process. As a community, we have faced tough challenges before, but we know that if we can make smarter investments by addressing the inequalities that foil new infections, we can accelerate progress. We have come a long way in the fight against this disease. We cannot afford to be derailed now. We must continue to draw inspiration from the journey we have traveled, building on the courage and determination of the community and civil society members who have led the fight for equitable access. And as we fight to end this disease as a public health threat, we are also building a strong platform for defeating all other diseases, those we face now and those that will likely emerge in the future. That is why our collective responsibility, our leadership, our shared responsibility and solidarity are urgent matters of equity and is equally important. Thank you. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
So my name is
Beans.
Yes.
Oh. The name is Beans Gawanas. Thank you so much, Madam, for the remarks. Let me invite the UNAIDS Eastern and Southern Africa Director, Ms. Anne Gatuku Shongwe, to make a brief remarks. Let's stick to 3 minutes, please.
Thank you so much. I don't know if we should talk about names also. Teasing you. Your Excellency, the First Lady, Monica Genkos, my dear sister, wonderful to have you here, and to the Vice Minister of Health of China, to all the directors of NACS and representatives from different AIDS responses in the countries, and all my colleagues. I know we're many here from the UN as well, and other partners, as well as the Executive Director who we heard from earlier. On behalf of UNAIDS, I would just like to share a statement from us, and really just to start by saying that this July, UNAIDS launched a global report that we titled The Path to End AIDS. And that report shows that the end of AIDS and the journey to ending AIDS is not a mystery. It is very clear that the political and financial choice is what we need to focus our attention on, to do 4 things. The one thing is to focus on the data, follow the evidence, to tackle the inequalities that my sister Beans talked so much about just now, to invest in communities, their systems, their leadership, to sustain the financial, political, and programmatic investments in the HIV response. If we do these 4 things and do them focused significantly on prevention, then we will make the progress that we have seen in so many of our countries. And yes, we have very good news of countries who have achieved targets, 95, 95, 95 targets. But we also have many, many gaps. And I think the gaps that we have seen, if we follow the data, these are stubborn gaps. These are gaps that are particular to communities. These are gaps that continue to cause that in our region, 3,100 girls are infected each week, that in some countries, 7 times more girls are infected than boys, that MSM and our key populations continue to have heightened new infections. So what is it that we need to do as we think through these paths and we think about the investments to turn the corner on prevention? I think the first thing I want to say is that if we really follow the data and we follow the political investments, the point about multisectorality is really important. But the important thing about it is that so much of our investment has been focused in the health sector, and we're seeing that increasingly. But we're leaving behind the strong advocacy that we need to continue to push for education outcomes, for social protection outcomes, for outcomes in nutrition, in other sectors, and in the economy and in the economic sector. So the multisectorality becomes really, really crucial. The second thing is that the cost of the complexity and controversial legal and policy issues that, again, Beans and Jonathan and others spoke about. What is the cost of bold leadership if we're able to stand and withstand the pushback against these human rights issues? It's a cost to us. And as we think about our investments in the future, as we think about our investments in prevention, we have to think about the fact that communities have had to hide because they don't have the ability to openly access resources, or that girls and young people cannot go and receive the sexual and reproductive services, health services that they require because of discrimination and laws that are against them. We rarely talk in our agenda on HIV about economy and the economic opportunities. Transactional sex is an epidemic in our region. And we have to really look at what are the shifts in our economic vulnerability that we need to make and invest in as we think about that? The climate carbon credits we were talking about last night. How do we move into that space? I want to also talk about the humanitarian settings. Some of your countries are in the middle of whether it's civil war or climate crises. In countries like Mozambique, we're seeing repeated, protracted humanitarian crises that cost the country more and are having to refill and replenish investments in AIDS responses that they had already done. My last point really is about the financial investments and sustaining the financial investments and what we look at as we think about sustainability. Here in Africa, we have the advantage of the Africa Leadership Meeting of Heads of State, who have been pushing for these sustainability dialogues that countries are having from country to country. I was in Rwanda last week. And in those discussions, what we are seeing is that where countries increase their domestic financing, the external partners match them, that the private sector also comes to the party. So we need to look at all these buckets of resources as we think about where to invest and to be able to really focus and target our sustainability roadmaps in ways that match the sustainability roadmap for financing with the prevention roadmaps, so that we actually are able to make the strongest investment case for prevention as the last mile and the biggest push that we need. So from us at UNAIDS, we have been working with you collectively on prevention roadmaps and supporting you in this space. For you as leaders, and we look forward to the report that you will follow me right now, we are curious and excited to be able to hear how leadership can drive the sustainability and preventions agenda in new ways and in different ways. And we at UNAIDS and all of our co-sponsor partners will stand with you, our governments, our communities, our civil society and other partners to ensure that the end of AIDS in our lifetime is possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne Gatuk Shongwe, for those remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, let me invite again Dr. Ruth Masha to give a brief highlight to Her Excellency on the position paper of the Director Generals of the AIDS Coordinating Authorities. And please note that after Dr. Masha's presentation, my co-moderator, Taimi Amambo, will then take over. I want to thank you for giving me this opportunity to be chairing since morning. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I was taking a nap. It was just comfortable to sit over there and listen. So yeah, please come over, Dr. Ruth.
Thank you very much. I'm going to be pretty fast. I don't want the time to go. I think we've spoken a lot more of what we want to present to you today. Your Excellency, this position paper is a position paper on the leadership role that we have as a group to ensure that we sustain effective leadership to secure the gains and bridge the disparities and expedite progress, as we have heard from all the speakers. We are recognizing that HIV prevention is the most fragile one when we look at the transitions in the ecosystem that we have. We have discussed about integrating vertical programs, health programs into national systems. We have the shrinking space in both legal and policy environment of addressing rights and inequality, competing priorities, including chronic care costs, pandemic preparedness, universal health coverage, and climate change, and funding transitions. And we know that when these discussions are happening, one of the challenges that we have is that prevention, again, risk being dropped down. I just want to share with you my experience of the how recently. When I was trying to talk to the Ministry of Finance about funding the HIV response, and the first question that the person asked me is, are you insane? not that he didn't care about HIV, but he looked at his books and he reminded me that I already had in a physical space occupying about 720 million US dollars that I had been given by PEPFAR and Global Fund. And that money should have done all the things that I was asking for. And so how will we ask for more money when we have not redesigned the current resource to meet some of the needs and to make the money work? Those are the transitions discussions that we're going to start to have. Is it a shilling replacing another shilling? Are we asking governments that for every shilling that we have been spending, please replace it if the donor has moved away? Or are we asking for systems that have evaluated, analyzed, and looked at our domestic resources and look at those funding transition and ensure that we are prioritized? The position paper is about consolidating the gains and seeing that we are in a very fragile situation. It's about the lessons that we have learned with the two pandemics coming together, the untold human impact that we had from here today, the pathways of inequalities that have been created, the levels of stigma and discriminate death and economic hardship, and also the fact that we had to be inside there to look at all these things, the vaccines, the drugs, the fear and the shame. I don't want to say much of the stigma and the shame that we saw in COVID-19. We had almost thought that having had decades of responding to HIV, that we would not face similar stigma and stigmatizing situations that we saw with COVID-19, but we realized that we had not invested enough to understand, even when the disease, the cause was known, and people were able to know how to prevent getting COVID. Also, the strong indication of where the scenarios people are fearing that the big fish will always swallow a small fish, and in our case, we always have to get strong country system, recognizing that when something as big as COVID-19 comes, we are likely to see a scenario where people forget the other disease. It's also a call for us to look at how to invest boldly in the ecosystem, the leadership that is required. And the speakers before me just spoke about bold leadership. Anne has just said it requires an investment. Sometimes when I tell people that it costs not less than $30,000 just to bring members of legislative assembly that will need to sit down and understand your legal environment, but that money is never put in any budget. And therefore, the legal gains that are made in countries that are really fragile situation continue to be eroded. It's also a call to remember that even when we speak about investing in communities, there must be money on the table for those community systems to work. Because a lot of time we have called about practical solution, communities need to be at the table, communities need to be engaged, while we know that some of those communities have lost their administrative functions and they are depending on meetings called here today for them to get travel incidentals to function. So what are we speaking about when we speak about meaningful engagement with structures that are dysfunctional? It's also a call for us to recognize that it's an entire system that we must do. Sustainability, we must go beyond the money. And that is a discourse that we are recognizing as we do this position today. The money working, the time, and the data as required of us, but it's also a call for us not to confuse progress with success, as Michelle Warren has just told us today. It's for us to see that we are smoking and we are making some progress because you're moving. But if you want to go with that speed, we have to change a paradigm of how we are doing business today. And what we want this forum to do is to leverage on experiences, to remobilize the political partnerships, to act collectively and invest in 4 strategic areas. And one of the pivot area is that we're talking about going back to our initial ideas about multi-sector leadership. And in this context, ask ourselves, what sectors do we need on the table? And I'll share with you a very brief experience before I'm told I'm time out. I recently went to a project and I was taking my board to visit a site. And it's a site that we have invested to provide opiate substitution therapy to people who inject drugs. So when we did the program, we did with the Ministry of Health, Ministry of Interior and Government Coordination, and the NAC was the one leading. So the program started working. And we have about 3,000 people who come every day at the hospital to receive their drug. Then, of course, we pushed back ourselves and let the Ministry of Health continue treating. Guess what happened when we went there? This person told me, you need to think of where to take this clinic because you have a bigger problem now. And he said to me, well, I asked why. He said, yes, I can give them methadone, but when I give them the methadone, they go and sit outside the office, the hospital gate. And now they are stealing small little things, and patients are complaining, the communities are complaining. You need to get away where they will go after they take their drugs. That's when I realized that actually, who was supposed to do that? Who was supposed to think that we needed to go to the Ministry of Housing and Sanitation, to look at the Ministry of Labor, to ensure that those people who are zombies now, human beings, they require a job. They require to do something with themselves every morning. So that is a kind of discussion that we're going to ask ourselves. What does a multi-sector response mean? Which systems are we asking for? What sectors are we asking for? How well is the justice system? Do they understand us? Do we speak jargon to ourselves? And does that require money for us to invest in those social systems as well as other financing systems that we require? It's also about us having to look back and look at the pathways that you're talking about. But these pathways require investment. And they require an investment of money, resources, and systems. Some of them is not even money. It is realigning national systems to speak to each other. We have projects speaking about sanitary towels. They are funded by the same government, but they are parallel to where you have the highest vulnerability or the poverty index, and the emphasis is not there. So what is our role? Our role is for us to look at that data and redirect those ministries that are actually doing the work in the right direction. And they do not refuse, but then we have to rethink what we really mean by that multi-sector. And that is why we are talking about investing in building those strong national HIV prevention system that cut across the workforce, the supply chains, the diagnostic, the cross-sector delivery, the monitoring beyond the projects. And this is what we are calling ourselves to, looking beyond the small little projects that we have. And then, of course, the joint alignment of fragmented projects with donors and getting ourselves a standard operating procedures. That area is to inform and shape country-led sustainability. And this is very critical for prevention. Today, very few countries can actually say how much does it cost to do a prevention program. Why? Because a lot of time we talk about how much we spend. Current spend, it does not mean the current costs. When we had the NACA's meeting, we had the cost between key population program in India and a key population program in Kenya. One is 5 times more, 10 times more. So let's not go to a Ministry of Finance with figures that we have not resonated, thought through them, and ask ourselves, what is the actual funding we're asking for? And then, of course, guide the current technical assistance models so that they can become long-term and strengthen the country leadership. And the last pivot area for this policy, by position paper, is to advance a country-led HIV agenda that is both at the global, regional, and come together at the country. We want to focus on strengthening the national voice and establish strategic partnership while we are encouraging our peer accountability and ways of disseminating our work. Thank you very much, Your Excellency. That is a brief summary of what this position paper is about. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ruth Masha, for really highlighting the key areas, the key recommendations from the paper that's about to be launched. We cannot wait to lay our hands on the position paper because we do know that those recommendations are key to us really getting to the last mile. Thank you so much for that. We are getting closer to our dignitaries to really give us their keynote and the message. And that's really the purpose why we are here also in this session. So please allow me to invite our Honorable Vice Minister of China to come to the podium and deliver his remarks. Thank you. Mr. Chang Gile is also titled the Vice President of the Chinese Preventive Medicine Association. He has vast experience working in disease prevention and control, public health emergency response, medical management, health personnel management, and training, and served as a Deputy Director of the Personnel Department of the Ministry of Health and the Director of Disease Control and Prevention Bureau of the National Health and Family Planning Commission prior to his appointment as a Vice Minister. So yes, so please put your hands together for our Vice Minister.
Thank you. 尊敬的纳米比亚第一夫人莫妮卡·根格斯阁下，尊敬的本纳格米部执行主任，纳米比亚卫生部埃斯特·穆因展格副部长，尊敬的主席先生，各位预防艾滋病联盟的代表，女士们、先生们、同事们、朋友们，大家好！非常荣幸代表中国政府来到美丽的纳米比亚，参加这次多部门领导力论坛。在此，请允许我利用此次机会，感谢联合国艾滋病规划署以及国家艾滋病机构论坛秘书处为这次会议的举办付出的努力，也感谢联合国艾滋病规划署、纳米比亚政府提供的支持。刚才发布的立场文件系统总结了艾滋病应对的演变面临的新环境、机遇和新挑战。更为重要的是，文件从多部门领导力建设的角度，提出了艾滋病终结路径的战略重点。中国政府高度重视艾滋病的防控工作，并在过去的数十年中取得了显著的成就。艾滋病经血传播基本阻断，母婴传播和注射吸毒传播降到了历史最低水平。艾滋病感染者检测的发现率持续的提升，抗病毒治疗覆盖率和治疗成功率均超过90%以上。中国整体疫情持续控制在低流行水平。不安全性行为是当前中国艾滋病传播的最主要的原因。针对立场文件提出的终结艾滋病路径的战略重点，我做如下3点回应。第一，我们将继续加强多部门领导力建设，推动由国家主导的艾滋病预防与健康议程。在健康中国2030规划纲要的指引下，中国坚持政府主导、部门协作、动员社会、全民参与的综合防治机制，将健康融入所有政策，落实预防为主，推行健康生活方式，减少疾病的发生。国务院艾滋病防治工作委员会将持续发挥艾滋病防治的领导作用，研究制定艾滋病防治工作的重大方针、政策和规划，协调解决全中国艾滋病防治工作中的重大问题，组织有关部门和单位，并动员社会各方面力量积极参与艾滋病的防治工作。第二，我们将进一步加强艾滋病防治服务的规模与质量，实现 可持续发展。中国政府每5年会制定艾滋病防治行动计划，行动计划会明确预期实现的目标和相应的策略和保障措施，用于指导各地的高质量防控工作。艾滋病防控工作高质量发展的根本是在质上提升，在质的提升中实现量的有效增长。我们将针对制约检测发现、抗病毒治疗覆盖和治疗成功等重点环节方面的问题，进一步加大工作的力度，创新工作方式，补足工作的短板，继续加强艾滋病感染者和病人的关怀支持，坚持以人为本，反对歧视，营造良好的社会环境，为群众提供全生命周期的高质量的艾滋病防治服务。第三，我们将持续加强国际间的交流与合作，倡导人类命运共同体意识。当今国际社会日益成为一个你中有我，我中有你的命运共同体。艾滋病、结核病、新冠、猴痘等传染性疾病的全球流行，更加深了我们对人类命运共同体的理解。在传染病疾病面前，没有哪个国家能独善其身。中国政府将通过南南合作等平台，继续加强艾滋病防治方面的技术交流和经验分享，同时积极参与全球预防联盟的相关活动，与国际社会一道为全球卫生健康而努力。最后，预祝这次会议取得圆满成功，预祝各成员国艾滋病防治取得重大进展，祝在座的大家身体健康，谢谢大家。
Very good. We are getting there. We are getting there. Thank you so much, Honorable Chang Jile, for those very good statements you have just delivered. Very supportive and encouraging, obviously, especially when you mention about quality improvements and continuous effort to find cure and to treat HIV and AIDS, and also to ensure that all our programs are people-centered and have an angle of justice and human rights approach. Thank you so much for those statements. Thank you. Another round of applause. Thank you. Before I invite our anchors to the podium, I was saying earlier to her that today I'm wearing big shoes. I'm only a size 4, but today I think I have a size 8 or 9. I'm trying to figure out the size of my ED's shoe size, and the Deputy Minister and also the Minister of Health. So today my shoe size is quite, even if I have to try to tie my shoelaces, I still feel like if I do one step, the shoe's just gonna remain behind, but it's not gonna happen. So I have all the support here. Yes. So yes, this week is quite a hectic week within the Ministry of Health, because I think this week we are hosting about 3 international events. One taking place also in the same venue here across the street. The other one is 4 hours away, where one of our executive director is also there. It's 4 hours away in Swakopmund. And so our please do bear with us, and I'm sure our Deputy Minister will probably pop in at some point either this afternoon or tomorrow morning to not just come and greet and meet, but also to really provide that message and statement to you. So before I do invite our First Lady, Madam Monica Genkos, to come to the podium, I really want you to bear with me to just really give you the introduction, who she is really in Namibia. I know many of you have met you on several occasions at different times in your life, but allow me to do this. I'm not going to break any protocol, but I'm going to exactly just give you what you really have been waiting for. So, Madam Genkos, the First Lady of the Republic of Namibia, is a qualified lawyer. Before assuming the First Lady role, she was a co-shareholder and managing director of Namibia's largest private equity fund. She served on the boards of large public and private sector companies as either a chairperson or a deputy chair, and played a meaningful role in the private sector development in the country, including the rollout of Namibia's first digitally enabled commercial bank, of which she was a founding shareholder and founding chairperson. Monica was awarded national honors, Most Distinguished Order of Namibia by former President Pohamba for her outstanding contribution to the socio-economic development of Namibia. She was inducted into the Business Hall of Fame. She received numerous merit awards, such as the Namibian Business Personality of the Year, awarded as the most innovative entrepreneur, and ranked by an international publication as one of Africa's top 100 economic leaders. Due to her extensive, yes, if we had time, a full day was not going to be enough to introduce to you our Flon. We call her Flon, the First Lady of the Republic of Namibia. So due to her extensive corporate experience, she was an influential member of high-level policy advisory boards, such as the Public Office Bearers Commission as a vice chair, the President's Economic Advisory Council, the governing party's think tank, and the National Council of the Namibia Chamber of Commerce and Industry. She also served on boards such as Association of Unlisted Investment Managers as a chair, the National Squash Association as president. You see here, either as chair or president or vice chair, the list. And the industries nominated steering committee for the Namibian Financial Sector Charter. Monica transitioned into her role as First Lady with an independent advice of a Big Four international audit firm, which at her request and expense assessed potential conflicts of interest and prepared her assets for voluntary public disclosure. Despite no identified conflict of interest, yes, we are going to clap for the whole day. Despite no identified conflict of interest, Monica implemented guidance to divest from most business interest, resign from numerous boards, and utilize a global best practice decision for continuous assessment. As First Lady, Ms. Genkos has leveraged her executive business expertise and network to complement President Genkos' poverty alleviation agenda. She implements her programs through the One Economy Foundation, focusing on public health, youth empowerment, education, entrepreneurial development, mental health, and gender-based violence. This includes the successful youth program, the #BeFree movement. Ms. Genkos is overseeing the institutionalization of key learnings from #BeFree into Project BeFree. Project BeFree is a one-stop youth center of excellence where young people co-create sustainable intervention that respond to youth needs by strengthening the resilience and decision-making capacity of adolescents and young adults. The project Be Free will, I can't say will provide, I should say the project Be Free provides a continuum of holistic services, including life skills courses, psychosocial support, the full spectrum of sexual and reproductive health clinical services, entrepreneurial development, the fourth industrial revolution skills development, and adolescent-friendly edutainment focused on character development. For many of you who know about this, and I told you I'm not going to break the protocol, but maybe I would. While you are here, you may want to really make time to visit the youth campus that was recently launched. So Ms. Kainkos is currently the patron of the Shack Dwellers Federation of Namibia. She serves on the board of Africa Reach as chairperson, the Ellen Johnson Presidential Center, the Concordia Leadership Council, and the Women Lift Health. She's a co-patron of the PLO Lumumba Foundation Africa Mentorship Program. To accommodate new focus areas, Ms. Kainkos stepped down as a board chair of the Urban Poor Fund International, an international financing facility linked to the Slum Dwellers International. In conclusion, this is an abridged version of the bio. In conclusion, Ms. Kainkos' work as First Lady was recognized through her recent election as the president of the Organization of African First Ladies. She was also appointed as a UNA Special Advocate and awarded the Berlin-based World Without AIDS Award, the US-based Concordia Leadership Award for Global Leadership, the Change the World Award from the Namibian Professional Speakers Association, and is a leadership awardee of the Pan-African Women's Organization. In addition, should I go on? In addition, Ms. Kainkos is recognized as one of the 100 most reputable Africans and one of the 100 most influential African women. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise and welcome our First Lady, Ms. Monica Kainkos, to the podium to deliver her keynote address. Ms. Kainkos.
Thank you. Please be seated. I never thought I'd get bored of my own profile. I guess it's not good morning anymore. I'm going to skip the protocols and just say a good afternoon to all of you. And welcome to Namibia, a country of contrasts, from the vast expanse of the Namib Desert that blends into a coastal line of over 1,500 kilometers. A sub-Saharan country where the temperature can drop to -5 degrees in winter and rise to as high as 45 degrees in summer. A country defined by the resilience of its people and political leadership that luckily doesn't blow hot and cold like our weather. Namibia's HIV response has made it easy for me to be a UNAIDS special advocate for adolescent girls and young women, as we've got such a good story to tell of how local solutions have global resonance. And I think you've experienced Taimia Mambo, our Deputy Executive Director at the Ministry of Health, and her incredible leadership, and a public health specialist who I have incredible respect for, and is part of a bigger team of people who are as competent and capable as she is. The contrasts in Namibia are not just geographic, they're also economic. We have discovered oil, with reserves estimated at about 11 billion liters of oil, while simultaneously pursuing a highly ambitious green hydrogen agenda that will see us as a major player in green energy. And there's no contradiction. Namibia is also classified as an upper middle income country, yet we are also the second most unequal country in the world from an income inequality perspective. There is a contradiction. And what that means is for people like May Victoria, CSO organizations do not qualify for grants. It disqualifies them, that classification, even though we have deep levels of structural poverty. And that's why you'll find countries like Namibia where you see the best of an African country, but you also see what you see in every other low-income country. And it's thanks to the pragmatism of partners like PEPFAR and certainly Global Fund, who've not factored in economic classifications that can mislead, and who continue to support the Namibian HIV response. Addressing inequalities, including the inequalities of opportunity, is important. And that's why we need to have a pragmatic approach and clear actions to address inequalities, including those relating to gender, to age, to the rural-urban divide, to education, employment, and income. It's also why it's important to have the likes of PEPFAR and Global Fund, who've played an important role in Namibia's HIV response. The last 3 years have not been easy for the Global South, and I think some of the resentments are starting to grow louder and louder. In addition to dealing with structural inequalities that compromise our public health responses, we also watched in horror at vaccine hoarding and vaccine inequities that defined the COVID response. We follow with concern how the PEPFAR, the reauthorization, has become bogged down in abortion politics. We see how global climate financing commitments are following the same inequitable lines of me first. We also can't act as if we don't see the disparate responses to the Ukraine-Russia war relative to the Israel-Palestine conflict, about what is acceptable and not acceptable in terms of international law. We are also seeing leaders, the same leaders, who warned us about sustainability of public health programs that are saving lives, and seeing how funds are being channeled to the insanity of war that actually takes innocent lives. In these times, it's easy to feel powerless. I don't envy the position that the leaders of United Nations agencies find themselves in, but I do respect their leadership that they've been showing during these very delicate times, because we must be consistent about the things we talk about. Leadership that understands that human lives matter, regardless of their religious, ethnic, geographic, or socioeconomic position. There is intrinsic value to every single human life. This is the same leadership that has defined the HIV response, a response that has been uncompromising in its position about a human rights-based approach. That human rights, the rights of every single human being, must be upheld at all times, no matter how difficult and noisy it becomes. This meeting happens at the right time. It happens in a moment where we need to be reminded of the global solidarity that has defined the HIV response, even though we start to see the contradictions and hypocrisy of what global solidarity is. A global response to HIV that has saved millions of lives, a response that has defined what multi-sectoral collaboration looks like, and a response, and I'm talking about the HIV response, that defines the gains achieved from a rights-based, human-centric response that remains above religious, ideological, and political pressures. It also happens at a time when we celebrate the gains highlighted in the Global AIDS Report of 2022, which also lets us focus on the gaps that remain. The gaps don't represent numbers and targets. They represent human lives, our very humanity. It's about the teenager in Windhoek, the young mother in Mumbai, the schoolgirl in Nigeria, the sex worker in Mexico, and the myriad stories of hope, resilience, and courage. We had the privilege yesterday at the center together with PEPFAR representatives to listen to the incredible work that Dreams has done in this country and change lives. Stories that remind me of how every day, and should remind you that our actions or the lack thereof have real consequences. When we talk about sustaining effective leadership to secure gains, bridge disparities, and expedite progress in HIV prevention efforts, we must also talk about the urgency, an urgency that has grown over the years, an urgency that suffers the risk of being lost in the noise of world events, and an urgency that will only continue to grow. The HIV response was able to provide leadership during the COVID pandemic of what an effective response looks like and how to navigate numerous challenges. The COVID pandemic, however, also opened us all to the reality of how polarized our societies are, how easily misinformation spreads on social media, and how important it is in difficult times to have bold leadership from all quarters. To safeguard the gains of the HIV response, every single voice matters. Each of us who have social media platforms and someone willing to listen to us is required to speak. Often we question our own voices, our mandate to use them, and the possibility, actually the reality of being told to shut up. If you have ever been unsure, as a First Lady, as someone who's not elected, as someone who has no formal mandate, I think I'm qualified to say to you that you do not need anybody's permission to provide leadership or to speak. I can use the example of the Organization of African First Ladies, of which I'm president of, and I'm going to just pause here. When I got elected as president of the Organization of First Ladies, the first thing I did, I went home and I said to my husband, there are 2 presidents in this house now. And I learned the hard way that don't make jokes with presidents about another president. But anyway, the Organization of African First Ladies has 43 members, African First Ladies who are members. And it's currently launched a We Are Equal campaign that focuses on gender equality. It's a year-long campaign that will be launched in several countries and targets the access to 600 million Africans. You'll not be surprised to hear that HIV is a focus area of this campaign, specifically HIV prevention. And I'll make time to engage any of you who's interested on how you can optimize key HIV prevention messages in that campaign. Another example may be more local. As First Lady, I've been involved in the establishment of an integrated adolescent-friendly youth campus that Taimi just talked about. Strong focus on prevention and treatment, provides SIHR services, including GBV mental health, provides daily meals to provide nutritional support. There's a life skills school that focuses a lot on HIV prevention, as well as other issues that young people speak about. A STEM center, entrepreneurial training and development. There's a gym, there's a library. But because young people regard access to free Wi-Fi as a human right, we've also taken a rights-based approach, and we've given them free Wi-Fi. It is a unique model, and my office did all of the fundraising, built the facility, donated the facility to the Ministry of Youth, 5 of whose officials operate with us at that building. We've also partnered with the Ministry of Health. We talk about integrating systems, not having vertical systems away from government systems. That's the only way you can scale. Ministry of Health, we have a commodity and a partnership agreement as well. We've adopted their data systems and procedures. And also private sector. As you heard, my background is private sector, and we've managed to convince blue chip Namibian companies to invest in this campus as well. We're excited at the policy decisions to roll out HPV vaccines to adolescent girls in this country. We are also excited about the soon-to-be approved policy for long-acting HIV prevention injectables. And the campus looks forward to providing support to scale up and tailor-make traditional interventions and frontier technologies and tailor them for adolescents and young people. If you have a moment, I think Taimi invited you, I'll invite you as well. Please do come to the campus while you're in Namibia. I'll be there for the next 2 days, so I do hope to see many of you there. I mention this because it speaks to the need for each of us to assess what it is that we can do to break silos within the HIV response and to complement government in the HIV response in a manner that is sustainable. The world is not fair. The reality is that for progress to be made, especially among vulnerable populations, HIV prevention must be country-owned with leadership, commitment, and accountability, starting at the very top, as well as very hard conversations, reflecting on many of the things that Jonathan spoke about. And we see it in many of the countries that we currently are working in. And we must be honest about these things. And we must be honest to the effect that it does have on public health interventions. We all know that HIV prevention has to be holistic. We cannot win this fight if our solutions do not address underlying socioeconomic, cultural, and structural barriers that predispose key and vulnerable populations. The technical deliberations of the next 2 days will be defined by 2 truths. One truth is that we are almost there. An AIDS-free generation is possible. We can feel it, we can see it. Second truth is that the risks of losing momentum is real. We can see the risks, we can feel them. I once sat in an adolescent mental health session we hosted with a psychiatrist during COVID. And a young person asked the psychiatrist what they should do when they feel so powerless. I'll never forget the response, as I too at that time was feeling powerless. The psychiatrist said that when you feel powerless, try and focus on the things that you can control. None of us in this room can control global events, but many of you can control key aspects of your HIV national responses. Focus on what is within your control. No matter what is happening in the world at the moment, there is hope. You do have power. You do have a voice. Global collaboration is vital, but what is most important are local solutions, including domestic funding, that are country-owned, rooted within the nuances and uniqueness and contradictions of our increasingly complex cultural and socioeconomic and political landscapes. Remobilizing commitments to fast-track the HIV response is not just about funds and frameworks. It's also about bold and accountable leadership. The position paper we are launching today on how to move forward in the context of complex environments is a demonstration of country leadership that all of you have shown. It's what Namibia also represents. It's also what you, the Director Generals of AIDS coordinating authorities and Ministry of Health officials, and everyone in this room represents. You represent accountability, action, and collective voices. In this room, I see leadership where it matters. I see people who have the passion and a plan to end AIDS and the power to make a difference. Don't let anybody tell you that you don't have power. And I also want to remind you of what the psychiatrist said. Focus on what is within your control. It is that focus that will protect the incredible gains we have seen in the HIV response. Bold leadership is not a luxury, it's a necessity. And I thank each of you for your leadership. Thank you.
Yes, that's really good. Thank you. All right. So thank you so much. Please rise. Wonderful, wonderful. We can take our seats. Thank you so much. Thank you. That's all what we have been waiting for. So I would like to call on colleagues to get ready for the launch of the position paper. Dr. Ruth, Dr. Madzima, and Dr. Alete to really just come to the, yes, up there in front. Your Excellency, Madam Kainkos, please, the team should be, Dr. Ruth, please accompany the First Lady down here to come to the launching session. Yes. Yeah. Great. And of course, protocol colleagues, please guide us how we are going to do this. Okay. And the cameras, I can see they are ready. Honorable Vice Minister, please. Yes, please go ahead. Prof. Sheila and you and the resident coordinator also get ready to come down. Yes, get ready. It's just a say, we're just doing it in phases, but yeah. Thank you. The stairs are this side. Just be careful of the stairs. You don't have heels like me, so. No, I don't. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Dr. Pula? Yes, please. And of course, myself representing the ministry.
I will hold brief, unannounced. So thank you very much. So we now ask Her Excellency, Madam Monica Gengos, if you could please launch the documents by cutting the ribbon for us, please. Let's stand up. Let's give a round of applause to Her Excellency. Thank you very much. I think that's how we do it, isn't it? Thank you. Thank you very much. We shall ask perhaps if we can get all the speakers, if you can come to the front so that you can have a photo with Her Excellency, the speakers, please. Anne, Beans, Victoria, Cheryl. I think we have any of the other speakers. Okay, Chipanta, sorry, David, as I call you, Dr. David. Rosemary, please, representing UNFPA. I can see Jonathan is already here. Thank you very much. The cameras, I hope you're clicking away. I will also ask the co-convener of the steering group of the HIV Leadership Forum, Dr. Atuahene, please join the team. Okay, let's give them a round of applause. A round of applause, please. Okay, some more photos, one more click all around. I didn't hear them say cheers, so please say cheers. Okay, thank you very, very much. What I would like to request, all of us who are standing, except those at the front, can go back to our seats so that we can ask Her Excellency and the team to walk to the back where we are going to have our photo session. The chairs are already laid out, so please let's give them space and let's allow them to walk there first. We are guided by protocol. Your Excellency, please, you may walk all the way to the back. Let's accompany her, Dr. Ruth, Professor. Yes, you will come back. Please, let's accompany Her Excellency.